Dr. Neufeld says over 95% of the problem behavior of children was never intended. It was not on purpose. Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andee Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited about today's episode. We're diving into something that's absolutely fundamental to Connect Method Parenting, something I call the power of seeing your child. It's a concept that is straight out of my book. It's one of those game-changing mindset shifts that can completely transform your relationship with your child. And I really do mean completely transform it. So today we're going to explore what it means to see your child versus trying to correct your child. This distinction is at the heart of Connect Method Parenting, and it's one of the top reasons parents get stuck in frustrating cycles with their kids when there's off-track behavior. I've been thinking about this topic a lot lately. I've had so many conversations with parents who are exhausted from trying to fix, quote unquote, fix their child's behavior. They're using consequences and rewards and timeouts and sticker charts and you name it. And they're feeling like nothing's working. Does that sound familiar? That was so my vibe back in the day. I was trying to fix the kids. I was using everything I knew, the consequences, rewards. I had a family store that they could buy little things if they earned it, all of the things. And still, the benefit of that, the listening improvement would be so short term. The kids wouldn't be listening very long. Everyone would be frustrated. So if this sounds familiar to you, I know it because I've been there. So let's start by talking about what I call the correction trap. This is a belief that good parenting is all about correcting your child's behavior, teaching them a lesson. It's this idea that when your child does something wrong, your job is to train them, is to help them know that they did something wrong, is to correct them, is to make sure they don't ever do it again by giving them a punitive consequence, by giving them a lecture, by taking something away that they love. This belief is so deeply ingrained in our parenting culture that most of us don't even question it. We think, of course, I need to correct my child when they're being rude or not listening or making a mess. That's my job as a parent. I need to give them a consequence. I need to make this painful for them or make this uncomfortable for them so they don't do it again. But here's the thing. This approach is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what's actually happening when our child's behavior goes off track. When we're stuck in this correction mindset, we see our child's behavior as the problem that needs fixing. We think, my child is being disrespectful and I need to correct that, or my child isn't listening and I need to fix that. But what if I told you that your child's behavior isn't actually the problem? What if I told you that their behavior was information, valuable information about what's going on inside of them, what's going on with their nervous system? This is where the concept of seeing your child comes in. In my book, I talk about seeing your child, and I describe that this means looking beyond their behavior to understand what's happening underneath it. It means recognizing that behavior is communication and that our job as parents isn't to correct the communication. It's to understand the communication. It's to understand the message. I was recently revisiting some of the work of Dr. Gordon Neufeld. If you've been around me much, you've heard me talk about him. I think he's fantastic. If you're not familiar with him, he's a brilliant developmental psychologist whose insights have deeply and profoundly influenced my approach to parenting. So I was revisiting some of the things I've learned from him over the years, and he talks about this idea that many of today's parents are reaching out to everyone and everywhere for advice on what to do about their child's behavior, because we are trying to make sense of our children from the outside in. And when we do this, we are more likely to fall into what he calls the fundamental attribution error, or assuming that whatever our child did was on purpose and thinking we fix it by fixing the behavior. So we ask ourselves, or we ask them rather, why did you hit your sister? Why did you lie? As if they sat down and thought about it and that they had a reason, that they calculated this behavior they were going to do, hitting their sister or lying. But Dr. Neufeld says over 95% of the problem behavior of children was never intended. It was not on purpose. This is so important. And if it was never intended and not on purpose, it's coming from somewhere else. There's an emotional problem. There's a relational problem. It's subconscious. It's coming because they didn't feel safe. There's something else to understand. So this is so important that we get this. When your child is having a meltdown in the grocery store, which happened to me so many times. Can you imagine taking 6 kids to the grocery store? It was hard not to have a meltdown. So when a child inevitably had a meltdown when I took them to Target or Walmart or wherever we were going, they're not trying to embarrass you. I had to remind myself of this. They're not trying to embarrass me. They're not trying to make my life difficult. They're communicating something. Maybe they're overwhelmed or tired or hungry. Maybe they're feeling disconnected. Maybe something didn't go well at school. Maybe their sibling said something that hurt their feelings. There's a reason. Maybe they just don't want to be at the store. They don't like that we're there. They're tired of it. They don't have a big attention span or the ability to behave that long in the store. Or let's take a teenage example. When your teenager slams their door and refuses to talk to you, they're not being disrespectful just to push your buttons. They're communicating something. Maybe they're feeling misunderstood. Maybe they're feeling judged. Or they don't like what's going on. They don't feel like they have enough autonomy. They don't feel like they like what's going on at school. They're feeling embarrassed about a test that they didn't do well on. A friend didn't text them back. There's so many reasons. Seeing your child means approaching these situations with curiosity instead of judgment. It means asking, what is my child trying to tell me right now? Instead of, how do I make this behavior stop? I remember a situation with my own daughter. She was about 10 at the time. She was having a very hard time at bedtime, refusing to go to bed, coming out of her room constantly and repeatedly, finding every excuse in the book to stay up late. And my initial reaction was frustration. I was still working through changing my mindset. I was a human. I was tired, like so many reasons, right? That the thought came to me, why is she being so difficult? Why can't she just go to bed? She needs to sleep. And for a moment, I was stuck in this correction mindset. I saw her behavior as a problem that needed to be fixed. And then I noticed what I was doing. I said, oh, wait, I'm falling back into the old trap. I'm seeing behavior as a problem, not as communication. What is it saying? I paused, I shifted, and I decided to try to really see her. I realized something really important. Her behavior wasn't the problem. It was information. She was telling me that something was clearly not working for her. Thank goodness that I had this interruption in this moment, because instead of trying to correct her behavior with consequences or threats, I sat down with her and got curious. I made eye contact with her. I established a working relationship. I came alongside her emotions. I tried to understand what was going on for her. Why was it hard for her to stay in her room? And I even asked her, what's going on? But from curiosity and compassion, not from judgment, not from a fix-it kind of energy. And she said to me that she was having really scary thoughts. She didn't like being alone in her room. She was worried about what might happen. So her behavior wasn't defiance, it was fear. And once I saw her as a human being having an experience of fear, feeling nervous to be alone, everything changed. My nervous system calmed down, hers calmed down. I was able to connect with her, come alongside, and we were able to work together to address what was really going on. So we came up with strategies to help her feel safer at night. And the bedtime battles disappeared because I stopped putting up the fight, and eventually her ability to feel safe at night to go to bed increased. So she was able to sleep and go to sleep by herself and stay in her room by herself easier. It wasn't so scary. That's the power of seeing your child instead of trying to correct your child. Now, I want to talk for a bit about why this approach works from the scientific perspective, because it's not just some feel-good philosophy. It's backed by what we know to be true about the brain and the nervous system. When a child feels seen and understood, their nervous system relaxes. They feel safe. And when they feel safe, their prefrontal cortex, the part of their brain responsible for rational thinking, for problem solving, for emotional regulation, it can function properly. But when a child feels judged, criticized, misunderstood, not safe, their nervous system goes into protection mode. The brain perceives a threat, and the fight, flight, freeze response kicks in. Their prefrontal cortex goes offline. They literally cannot think clearly. They can't regulate their emotions effectively, or even at all in some cases. And this is why correction often makes the behavior worse, not better. When we respond to our child's off-track behavior with consequences, with lectures, with disapproval, we're actually triggering their stress response. We're making it harder for them to behave well. But when we respond by seeing them, by approaching with curiosity and compassion, we help their nervous system stay regulated. We keep their thinking brain online, which means they're much more capable of learning, of growing, of making good choices. And Dr. Neufeld, I think, sums it up so well. He says the problem when we think it's on purpose, the problem with a fundamental attribution error is we get on the wrong side. We start with an adversarial relationship with our child. But what we really need, he says, is to come alongside our child. I did a whole episode, I think it was called Coming Alongside. Highly recommend go back a few episodes. You should be able to find it, because we can't come alongside our child. We can't get on their side without making sense of what's going on for them from the inside out. That's exactly what seeing your child is all about, coming alongside them instead of positioning yourself against them. In my book, I introduce a practical tool called Stop, Drop, and Roll that helps parents shift from correction to connection in the heat of the moment. So let me walk you through it. STOP is an acronym. If you've been around me for any period of time, you know I absolutely love acronyms. They help me remember things. So it stands for see the other person. This is where you pause and you make a conscious effort to see your child, not just their behavior, but them, their nervous system, what they're struggling with. And you remind yourself that they're doing their best and that there's a reason for their actions, even if you don't understand it. Even if you can't logically make sense of it, you can give them the benefit of the doubt that there is some reason that they are acting this way. Drop stands for don't react, observe, then proceed. This is where you resist the urge to immediately correct or react to their behavior. Instead, you observe what's happening with curiosity. What might be causing this behavior? What does your child need right now? Those are such good questions. And then we roll, which stands for relax, open, listen, and learn. This is where you approach your child with an open heart and an open mind. You listen with the intent to understand, not to respond. You learn about what's going on for them beneath the surface, which they may not understand themselves. So you're having to really pick up on those clues. You're having to be the interpreter of their behavior because they might be completely oblivious to what's really happening for them. Let me give you a real life example of how this works. A little while ago, I was working with a mom who was struggling with her 7-year-old son's aggression towards his sister. He would take her toys and push her to the ground and antagonize her, especially when this mom was busy and distracted. And this mom had tried everything in the correction playbook when she had come to me. She tried timeouts and taking away privileges and teaching the child with lectures about being kind, but nothing had worked. In fact, when she came to me, she said, it feels like it's getting worse. So I helped her go through the stop, drop, and roll process. First, can we stop and see your son as a whole person, not just his aggressive behavior? Remember, he's a good kid who's struggling right now. He's not mean or bad. So we went back to this moment, one of the scenarios where he was being aggressive, and we visualized what it would be like for her to see her son who was struggling instead of the way her brain wanted to label him as mean or aggressive. And then we did the drop. So can we drop your immediate reaction? And this was all in hindsight, we were visualizing it. Can you drop your reaction to correct and to punish and instead observe the pattern? And doing this work, going back and reliving a situation and seeing if we could respond differently. Like, when does this behavior happen? Like, is it happening before bedtime? Is it happening in the morning? And taking moments where it's happening and going back and revisiting it and trying to understand for our benefit so we can show up the best we can in the moment to help our children show up the best they can is so powerful. So we might ask ourselves, what might be triggering him? What might be bothering him? How is this developmentally appropriate? And then we went through roll. So same scenario, we're going through this little moment where her son was being a little aggressive, and can we roll with it with an open, curious approach? Can we relax, open, listen, and learn? And what was so powerful is as we were talking this through, there was so much understanding coming up for this mom. And she was noticing things that she had missed. and things she could have done, coming alongside, being able to separate the children, not being so dysregulated herself. She could see things differently. And she said, one of the things I could say maybe is, it looks like you're having a hard time, and redirecting. We came up with some ideas of how she could respond with so much compassion and firmness in the moment with some play, or she could try to redirect. And so many light bulbs were going off. So the next time it happened, she went through the stop, drop, and roll. And she told me something that was so fascinating. She was able to do it fairly well. She said, I need to practice some more, which makes sense. It takes some repetition to get this stuff down. As we were going back and reviewing some of these past scenarios where her son had done things she wasn't loving, she didn't like, she started to realize that the amount of attention she was giving him was so much greater when he was having these problems, when he was behaving in this way. And so she saw an opportunity to connect with him with that much attention and presence in moments where he wasn't misbehaving. So that was fantastic for her to realize that. And then she, as we were talking through it and I was guiding her, then she started to realize, wow, what if his behavior isn't just random meanness? What if it's a desire, a request for connection? What if he doesn't feel safe? What if something else is happening that I've been missing all along? And she started to understand that the real message behind his behavior was something that she hadn't been seeing. And now she could start to discover it and then start to address the problem. She started setting aside one-on-one time with him every day, giving him really beautiful, positive attention that was proactively created instead of negative attention when he was misbehaving. That was a more of reactive attention. And over time, as she did that, as she responded with more compassion and firmness in the moment, and she got more and more aware of how she was thinking so she could be more regulated, the aggressive behavior decreased dramatically. This is the power of seeing your child instead of trying to correct their behavior. So I want to talk about 3 really important insights that are often eclipsed in today's parenting world, and they align perfectly with what we're talking about today. The first is that relationship is the context for raising children. The attachment of a child to the adults in their life is the single most important factor in their development. That's why seeing your child and truly connecting with them is so important. It's so powerful. Second, emotion is nature's answer, not a problem. So many parents try to shut down or control their child's emotions, and I understand why. They're so uncomfortable for us to see our children have different emotions. We might not have been comfortable with those emotions ourselves or not have been allowed to have certain emotions when we were a child. So it can be very dysregulating for us to have our children have big emotions. But what I want to say is that all emotions are part of this human experience. And emotions are actually how nature moves us. When we can see that, when we can understand that and get comfortable with the fact that our child's emotions are valuable for them to learn and grow. They are the engine to their maturation. They're valuable information that we need to understand, that we need to help them navigate, that we need to help them be comfortable feeling. They're not problems to be fixed. And when we can allow space for our child to have whatever emotion comes up and we have the capacity to handle that emotion, they will have the capacity to handle it too. They will move through the emotion, they'll process it, they'll feel it, and as a result, they will become more and more emotionally mature. Third, play is essential for healthy development and well-being. Play is nature's workshop. It's where children can process emotions, they can practice skills, and develop in a safe context. When we're too focused on correction and outcomes, we often squeeze out this vital and essential role of play. These insights reinforce why seeing your child is so much more effective than trying to correct them. When we focus on relationship, when we honor emotions, when we make space for play, we're working within nature's design rather than against it. Now, I know you might be hearing me say this and you might be thinking, but Andee, if I don't correct my child's behavior, aren't I just letting them get away with it? Won't they just think it's okay to act that way? This is probably the most common concern I hear from parents when I talk about moving away from correction, and it's a valid question, but here's the thing. Seeing your child doesn't mean you don't have boundaries. It doesn't mean you don't have limits. It doesn't mean you let harmful or disrespectful behavior continue unchecked. It means you approach the situation differently. Instead of focusing on making the behavior stop through punishment or through consequences, you focus on understanding what's causing the behavior and addressing the root cause. When you do this, the behavior often resolves because the underlying need is met. And if the behavior doesn't resolve, if it doesn't get better, you can still set a very firm and compassionate limit. But you do it from a place of connection and from understanding, not from correction and judgment. For example, you might say, I can see you're really frustrated right now, and that makes sense. And the answer is no. Let's figure out another way to let out your frustration. This approach acknowledges their feelings, so you're seeing them, while still maintaining a clear boundary about the behavior, clear limit about the behavior. So it's both compassionate and firm. And I call this setting a connective limit, where you're firm about the rule, about the boundary, about the limit, but it's coming from a place of compassion and understanding rather than judgment. So if you think about it, if a police officer pulled you over for not having your license plate on, the officer is going to set a clear limit. Hey, you need to get your license plate on your car. This actually happened to me. It's the craziest thing. Actually, it wasn't my license plate. It was the registration stickers that you put on that shows that you've paid to have your car registered. So we had moved and the car had to get re-registered. And for some reason, the stickers just never got put on. It was the weirdest thing. They just never got put on. The car had been registered, but the stickers had never been put on. So I got pulled over. I was with my sister-in-law. We were going to brunch. Or no, we were going to get our nails done. Anyway, we were doing something. She was getting married in a few months, and we were going and doing something fun to celebrate. And I got pulled over, and I do not like getting pulled over. Anyway, got pulled over, didn't have any stickers on it. I couldn't figure out where they were. They weren't even in the car. And the officer set a really clear limit, like you need to get your stickers on your car. But he did it with so much kindness and understanding, not shame or judgment. Now, maybe a different police officer might do it with shame and judgment, but this one didn't. He just said, hey, you got to go get those on. He was able to look up the license plate and see that it had been registered, but the law is I have to have the stickers on. So he did it very firmly, and he made it really clear what the rule was and that I needed to get them on. And it's a great example to me of not backing down on the rule, but doing it not in a mean, judgy, shamey way. So think about that. How are you setting this firm limit, and why not set it with compassion and firmness? How would you like someone as an adult, if someone needed to set you straight, needed to set a limit like this police officer did with me, do you respond better to kindness and understanding or shame or judgment? I will tell you, for me, I was so glad he was kind and understanding, but very firm, because the shame and judgment would have made me upset or would have made me feel bad. It just would have been a totally different experience. So another objection I often hear is, but my child needs to learn that there are consequences for their actions in the real world. And yes, that's true. But here's the question. What do you want your child to learn from those consequences? Do you want them to learn to make good choices only to avoid punishment? Or do you want them to develop intrinsic motivation to do the right thing because they understand the impact of their actions on themselves and others? When we rely on correction, when we rely on consequences, we're teaching external motivation. Behave well to avoid this punishment, or behave well and you'll get this reward. But when we focus on seeing our child, on helping them understand the natural impact of their choices, we're fostering intrinsic motivation. We're sending the message, hey, behave well because it feels good, because it creates positive connections with other people, because you feel productive. Which approach do you think will serve them better in the long run? And if you want to flip it, ask yourself this: which approach do you think would serve you better in the long run? What would you respond better to? Now, I want to acknowledge something really important. Seeing your child isn't always easy. In fact, it can be so challenging, especially in those heated moments when their behavior is pushing all of your buttons. When your toddler is having a full-blown tantrum in the middle of Target, which has happened, real life experience there, or your teenager is rolling their eyes and talking back to you, again, also has happened to me. It takes real presence and self-regulation to pause and to shift and to go from correction to connection. And this is where self-compassion comes in. Remember, we are humans too, and you're doing the best you can with the tools and with the resources and with the circumstances that you have in that day, in that moment. So if you find yourself slipping back into correction mode, and we all do this sometimes, don't beat yourself up. Just notice it. Take a breath. Try again. You don't want to trigger your own nervous system. It'll decrease your ability to learn from that situation. It'll decrease your ability to respond better, to turn things around. So each time you practice seeing your child, practice seeing yourself too. It's going to get easier and easier. And remember, this isn't about being a perfect parent. It's about growing. It's about learning. It's about coming alongside your child, creating a relationship based on mutual respect and understanding. We've lost the cultural wisdom that used to guide parenting. In the past, parents didn't have to consciously think how to parent. It was embedded in culture. It was embedded in the practices of the culture, in the rituals, in the roles. But now in our modern world, we've lost much of the implicit wisdom, and we need to replace it with conscious insight. That's exactly what we're doing when we practice Connect Method Parenting. When we practice seeing our child, we're developing the insight to understand them from the inside out, which allows us to parent from a place of wisdom rather than reaction. So you might be asking yourself, Andee, how do I put this into practice in everyday parenting? How do I do this? Well, I'd love for you to come into a pivot or into mastery so you can learn with me. I'd love that. But here are some practical steps that you can take to shift from correction to connection right now. If you're not in one of my containers, and if you are, this will add to everything we're learning, because everything I create on this podcast is it's to support both those who are working with me and those who aren't. So wherever you are, know this is going to support you. Number 1, practice the pause. When your child's behavior triggers you, take a deep breath before responding. That tiny moment of space can help you shift from reaction to intention. Number 2, get curious. Ask yourself, what might be going on for my child right now? What are they trying to communicate through this behavior? Approach this situation with genuine curiosity. Number 3, connect before directing. Meaning, before you ask your child to do something, connect with them first. Establish a working relationship. Look at them in the eyes. See if they'll respond back. See if they'll smile. See if they'll nod. See if they'll laugh at something you say. Before you can give them a direction, you need to make sure you're on the same page. So that's number 3. Number 4, validate their feelings. Let your child know that their emotions make sense, even if their behavior needs to be changed. So I can see you're really angry right now, and that's okay. All emotions are important and they're here for a reason. They're information. So let them know that you're not afraid of any of their emotions, that they make sense, that you get them, that they're allowed to have them. 5, set limits with compassion and firmness. When you need to set a limit, do it with understanding. Do it with compassion. Do it from a place of leadership. You could say something like, I know you're having fun and it's time for dinner right now. 6, reflect on your triggers. I want you to notice when you're most likely to slip into correction mode. Is it when you're tired or stressed, when you're in public, when you're around a certain person? Understanding your triggers can help you prepare and respond differently. And we're going to wrap it up with number 7, practice self-compassion. Remember that shifting from correction to connection is a journey. It's not a destination. Be gentle with yourself as you learn and grow. You're going to have moments where you respond in such a beautiful way, and then times where you won't, and that's okay. You can learn from all of it. I want to just share one more story that illustrates the power of seeing with your child. So a couple of years ago, I was working with a parent who was struggling with a child who was having all of this resistance to homework, and it was really confusing because this child had always done really well on their assignments, and now they were starting to lie about getting them done and get defensive when the parent tried to help. And the initial approach that this parent took was classic correction, which I totally get. Implemented consequences for not doing homework, lectured about the importance of this education that they were getting, tried rewards to incentivize them to complete the assignments. Nothing was working long-term. He had little wins, but nothing long-term. And the relationship was becoming increasingly strained. And when this parent came to me and described what had been happening, I encouraged this parent to start seeing their child, to start trying to understand what was going on beneath the surface of this behavior. And so this parent started doing this, started trying to approach the moments with calmness, with curiosity, with acceptance instead of judgment, saying things like, I've noticed homework's been really tough lately. Can I help you? What do you need? I'm here for you. I get it. And at first, the child was really skeptical. She thought he was trying to do something. The parent was trying to do something, get her something out of it. She was used to being lectured, not listened to. But once this parent did this enough times, the child realized that the parent was genuinely trying to understand, not correct. She was able to trust him. She opened up. She told him about something that had happened at school, that how math had gotten really difficult, how she had been embarrassed when the teacher had asked her to go to the chalkboard and do a math problem and she couldn't get it right. And so she was just mortified and she didn't think she was smart at all. And she had not wanted to admit she was struggling. She wanted to try to pretend she wasn't struggling. She would avoid it. She didn't want to think about how bad she was. And she started to process this with him. And once the parent understood that the behavior was coming from embarrassment and fear, not laziness or defiance, everything shifted. The heart of this parent softened. They were able to work on the real issue. They arranged for help. There was support given during homework time, not to police her, but to be supportive to this child. And the homework battles disappeared. And more importantly, their relationship strengthened. The daughter learned that she could come to her parent with problems instead of hiding them. And that's the power of seeing your child instead of trying to correct them. I want to touch on something really important that isn't talked about enough, and that's the role of play in healthy development. Play is nature's workshop. It's nature incognito, where we get to develop different parts of ourselves. We get to experience emotions in ways that maybe we can't in real life. And a lot of important developmental work happens in play without us even realizing it. Oftentimes, though, in our rush to correct behavior and push for outcomes, we often squeeze play out of our children's life. But play is actually one of the most powerful contexts for seeing your child and for them to feel seen. When you play with your child, whether it's imaginative play, being silly, doing an obstacle course, you create a safe place where they can express themselves freely. Play lowers defenses and creates connection. It's a natural bridge between you and your child. I've seen this work wonders with the families I work with. One mom was struggling with her son who had become increasingly defiant and angry. And instead of focusing on correcting the defiance, I suggested she set aside 15 minutes a day for child-led play, where her child got to choose the activity and directed how they played. And she said at first it was super awkward. She was so used to being in the teaching and correcting role, but as they established this daily play ritual, something magical happened. Her son began to open up during play in ways he had never done during their serious conversations. She got a glimpse of what was going on for him through his play, his fears, his frustrations, his dreams. And as their connection strengthened through play, the defiant behavior began to decrease. He got a lot of that foul frustration out during play as well. He felt seen, he felt understood, he felt safe with her. He didn't need to act out to communicate his needs as much because he was getting them out in play. So if you're trying to shift from correction to connection, don't underestimate the power of play. It's not just quote unquote fun time. It's a vital context for seeing your child and for them to feel truly seen by you. So even though we've lost the cultural wisdom that used to be guiding parents in the past, and that parents used to not have to consciously think about how to parent because it was embedded in cultural practices and rituals and roles, we can intentionally start reintroducing that cultural context, those guiding principles, those rituals, those practices, those roles today, once we realize that that's what's missing. So just sitting down for a meal, which has been part of every culture that I can think of, is so valuable in the context of parenting, because sitting down for a meal isn't just about eating. It's about connecting. It's where families share, where they get connected, where they have important discussions. That is a ritual that we can reintroduce and prioritize in our family if we haven't been doing that. Because in our modern, fast-paced world, we've lost so many of these cultural practices that naturally foster connection. So looking for things that can be done regularly to introduce connection is something I would encourage everybody to do. Because when we don't see it, we become more susceptible to parenting by correction or by Google or whatever the latest trend is. But if we can go back to the roots of parenting through relationships, parenting through safety, parenting through connection, so many things will start to turn around. This is why conscious insight or knowledge through our language and through our words, as opposed to knowledge without words, is so important today. We need to deliberately understand and cultivate the understanding that used to be implicit in culture. That's exactly what we're doing when we practice seeing our children. We're developing the insight to understand them from the inside out, which allows us to parent from a place of wisdom rather than from a place of reaction and correction. So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this thought. One of the greatest gifts you can give your children is to truly see them, to look beyond their behavior to the beautiful and complex whole person they are. When our kids feel seen, when they feel understood, they develop a secure sense of self. They learn that their thoughts and their feelings and their experiences matter. They build the emotional intelligence to understand themselves and others. And they develop the intrinsic motivation to make good choices, not out of fear, not out of trying to avoid punishment, but out of genuine desire to contribute positively to their relationships and communities. This is the foundation of Connect Method parenting, moving from correction to connection, from fixing to understanding, from judgment to curiosity. So I want you to start asking yourself 2 transformative questions that align perfectly with what we've been talking about today. First, what do I see instead of what should I do? This shifts us from reaction to understanding. Again, what do I see instead of what should I do? And second, what does this child need from me to enable nature to do its good work? This reminds us that our job isn't to force or control development, but to create the conditions where our child can fulfill their potential, where they can flourish. So these questions can guide us as we practice seeing our child, helping all of us stay focused on what truly matters in parenting. It's not always easy. I get that. Having 6 kids in 8 years was anything but easy. But when we can parent from a place of connection, it feels so worth it. The investment to shift our brains, to change the way we're seeing our kids, to show up differently as a parent is so worth the investment of our time and energy, because the relationship that you build with your child through seeing them will last a lifetime. Long after the specific behaviors you might be worried about today have faded into the distant past. So next time your child's behavior pushes your buttons, I invite you to pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, what would happen if I tried to see my child right now instead of correct my child right now? This simple shift could change everything for you. Thank you so much for listening today. I really love creating these episodes for you all to listen to. If you found this helpful, I would love it if you shared it with another parent who might be interested in hearing this message. And if you haven't subscribed or left a review on the podcast and have time to do that too, that would mean the world to me. It helps get this out to more people. And I want to also just say, I want you to remember, please remember, you're doing such an important work, and that your commitment to growing as a parent is one of the greatest gifts you can give your child. All right, I'll talk to you all next time. Have a great day. Bye. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, come check out my Connect Method Parenting Coaching Program, where we take this material and we apply it using my proven formula. Head over to cmp.works/join.